In August 1977, Elvis Presley's estate was worth approximately $4 million. By 1993, it was generating over $15 million annually. The man who died never authorized that transformation. Elvis Aaron Presley died on August 16, 1977, at Graceland in Memphis, Tennessee. He was 42 years old. At the time of his death, he had been one of the most recognizable figures in American entertainment for over 2 decades. His career had spanned rockabilly, gospel, film, and Las Vegas residencies. He had sold hundreds of millions of records. He had defined a generation's relationship to popular music. But his estate, at the moment of his death, was not structured for longevity. The will had been drafted on March 3, 1977, 5 months before his death. It was prepared by his attorney, Peter Smith III, in Memphis. The document was 17 pages long. It was a standard testamentary instrument, clear in its immediate provisions but vague in its long-term guidance. Elvis named his father, Vernon Elvis Presley, as executor and trustee. The estate was to be held in trust for the benefit of his daughter, Lisa Marie Presley, who was 9 years old at the time. Vernon was designated as the sole trustee during his lifetime. Upon Vernon's death, control would pass to 2 co-trustees, the National Bank of Commerce in Memphis and Joseph A. Hanks, Elvis's accountant and business manager. The primary beneficiary was Lisa Marie. The will also provided for Elvis's grandmother, Minnie Mae Presley, and his father, Vernon, during their lifetimes. But the bulk of the estate, the residual value after expenses and bequests, was to be preserved for Lisa Marie. She would receive income from the trust during her minority. At age 25, she would inherit the estate outright. On paper, this seemed adequate, but the estate Elvis left behind was not a simple inheritance. It was a financial construct built on cash flow, royalties, image rights, real estate, and ongoing obligations. And it was in decline. At the time of his death, Elvis's liquid assets were limited. Graceland, the mansion he had purchased in 1957, was valued at approximately $500,000, but maintaining it cost nearly the same amount each year. The staff included cooks, gardeners, security personnel, and maintenance workers. Utilities for the property were substantial. Property taxes were ongoing. Insurance was expensive. The house was not generating revenue. It was consuming it. Elvis's primary income had come from live performances and recording royalties, but he had not toured extensively in the final years of his life. His health had deteriorated. Performances were inconsistent. His relationship with his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, had become financially entangled in ways that were not immediately transparent. Parker, whose real name was Andreas Cornelis Van Queek, had managed Elvis since 1955. He had negotiated Elvis's contracts with RCA Records, his film deals, and his Las Vegas residencies. He had also taken a percentage of Elvis's earnings that was far above industry norms. Standard management fees ranged from 10 to 15%. Parker's agreements gave him 50% of many revenue streams. In some cases, more. This arrangement had been in place for decades. Elvis had agreed to it, either knowingly or through a lack of scrutiny. But after his death, those agreements remained in effect. Parker continued to control merchandising rights, licensing deals, and royalty splits. He was not named in the will. He was not an executor. but he retained contractual authority over significant portions of the estate's potential income. Vernon Presley was 61 years old when his son died. He had worked in various jobs throughout his life: factory work, military service, and later as Elvis's gate guard and general assistant. He was not a lawyer. He was not an accountant. He was a father who had lost his only son and who was now responsible for managing the financial aftermath. Vernon retained much of the existing structure. He kept Joseph Hanks as accountant. He allowed Colonel Parker to continue his role. He did not challenge existing agreements. He did not seek independent audits. He managed the estate as it had been managed during Elvis's life, which is to say, he allowed others to manage it on his behalf. The first year after Elvis's death was chaotic. The estate owed federal estate taxes, estimated at over $7 million. There were outstanding debts to various creditors. Legal fees were accumulating. Graceland's operating costs continued. Revenue from record sales spiked briefly after Elvis's death, as often happens with deceased artists. But that revenue was split according to existing contracts. Much of it went to RCA and to Colonel Parker. Vernon attempted to manage the cash flow. He sold some of Elvis's personal property. He considered selling Graceland, but the offers were not sufficient to resolve the estate's financial problems, and Vernon's health was failing. Vernon Presley died on June 26, 1979, less than 2 years after his son. He had suffered from heart disease. The stress of managing the estate likely contributed to his decline. At the time of his death, the estate's financial situation had not improved. Graceland was still draining resources. The tax obligations were still unresolved. Lisa Marie was 11 years old. Under the terms of Elvis's will, control of the estate now passed to the co-trustees, the National Bank of Commerce in Memphis, and Joseph Hanks. But within weeks of Vernon's death, a third party was brought into the structure. Priscilla Ann Presley, Elvis's former wife and Lisa Marie's mother, was appointed as an additional executor and trustee. This appointment was not specified in Elvis's will. Elvis and Priscilla had divorced in October 1973, 4 years before his death. The divorce had been amicable by most accounts. They had shared custody of Lisa Marie. But Priscilla had no formal role in Elvis's financial affairs during his lifetime, and the will made no mention of her. The legal mechanism for her appointment was a petition filed in Shelby County Probate Court. The petition argued that Priscilla, as Lisa Marie's mother and legal guardian, had a vested interest in the proper management of the estate. The bank and Hanks did not oppose the petition. The court approved it. Priscilla became a co-executor in August 19. Her first action was to request a full accounting of the estate's finances. She hired her own legal counsel, separate from the existing estate attorneys. She reviewed contracts, royalty statements, and expense records, and she identified problems. Colonel Parker's agreements were the most glaring. Priscilla discovered that Parker's 50% share applied not only to live performance income, which had ceased with Elvis's death, but also to merchandising and certain licensing deals that continued to generate revenue. Parker was receiving half of the income from Elvis-branded products, images, and promotional materials. This income was substantial, and it was ongoing. Priscilla also identified issues with RCA Records, Elvis's recording contract, negotiated by Parker in the 1950s and amended several times, gave RCA ownership of the master recordings. The estate received royalties, but those royalties were calculated based on rates that had been set decades earlier and were no longer reflective of market value. And Parker, as manager, was entitled to a share of those royalties as well. In 1980, Priscilla and her legal team filed a complaint in Shelby County Probate Court against Colonel Tom Parker and RCA Records. The complaint alleged breach of fiduciary duty, conflict of interest, and unjust enrichment. It argued that Parker had used his managerial authority to negotiate deals that benefited him at the expense of Elvis, and later, the estate had sought to void or renegotiate those agreements. The case did not go to trial. Parker and RCA both had legal resources and incentives to settle. Protracted litigation would have been expensive and uncertain. Negotiations began in 1980. The settlement was reached in 1983. The terms were confidential, but the practical outcome was clear. Parker's involvement with the estate was terminated. His share of future merchandising and licensing revenue was reduced and then eliminated. The estate regained control of Elvis's image rights, name, and likeness. RCA agreed to renegotiate royalty rates for certain catalog sales. Parker received a lump sum payment, reported to be in the range of $2 million, in exchange for relinquishing his claims. From a legal standpoint, the settlement was a victory for the estate, but from a financial standpoint, it came late. Parker had been collecting 50% of certain revenue streams for 6 years after Elvis's death. That money was not recovered. The settlement resolved future obligations, but it did not reclaim past income. During this same period, the estate continued to lose money. Graceland's operating costs remained fixed. Tourism revenue did not exist. The mansion was still a private residence, occupied by Minnie Mae Presley, who lived there until her death in 1980. After Minnie Mae's death, Graceland stood mostly empty. Staff maintained it, but there was no income to offset the expense. Priscilla proposed opening Graceland to the public. The idea was met with resistance. The co-trustees at the National Bank of Commerce were conservative in their approach. They viewed Graceland as a real estate asset, not a business. They believed the most prudent course was to sell the property and invest the proceeds in liquid assets that would generate income for Lisa Marie. Priscilla argued that selling Graceland would eliminate the estate's most valuable symbolic asset. Elvis's legacy was not just financial, it was cultural. Graceland represented that legacy in physical form. Selling it would be she believed the property could be monetized without being sold. The debate continued for months. Priscilla consulted with business advisors and tourism experts. She studied other historic properties that had been open to the public. She developed a business plan. The plan estimated that Graceland could attract several 100,000 visitors per year if properly marketed. Ticket sales, combined with merchandise and concessions, could generate enough revenue to cover operating costs and produce a profit. The bank remained skeptical, but Priscilla had leverage. As co-executor and Lisa Marie's mother, she could argue that her decision was in the best interest of the minor beneficiary. She could also threaten to file objections in probate court if the bank attempted to sell the property over her objection. The bank, facing the possibility of further litigation, agreed to the plan on a trial basis. Graceland opened to the public on June 7th, 1980. The opening was not extravagant. The estate did not have funds for a major marketing campaign. But word spread quickly. Fans of Elvis, many of whom had visited Memphis to see the gates of Graceland from the street, now had the opportunity to enter the house. They came in large numbers. The first year, Graceland attracted over 500,000 visitors. Ticket prices were modest, around $5 per person, but the volume was sufficient to generate over $2.5 million in gross revenue. Operating costs were approximately $1 million. The property turned a profit for the first time since Elvis's death. Priscilla expanded the operation. She opened a museum dedicated to Elvis's career, displaying costumes, gold records, and personal artifacts. She added a gift shop selling branded merchandise. She licensed Elvis's image for use on products ranging from posters to commemorative plates. She renegotiated agreements with international licensees, ensuring that the estate received a fair percentage of sales. By 1985, Graceland was attracting over 600,000 visitors annually. Revenue had grown to over $10 million per year. The estate's financial position had stabilized. Federal estate taxes, which had been deferred and renegotiated, were being paid down. The trust that held the estate's assets was building value, but none of this had been outlined in Elvis's will. The will had designated Vernon as executor and trustee. It had named the bank and Joseph Hanks as successors. It had not mentioned Priscilla. It had not authorized the commercialization of Graceland. It had not created a business entity to manage intellectual property. It had not anticipated that the estate would become a multimedia enterprise. The legal foundation for these changes was Tennessee probate law, which grants executors broad authority to act in the best interests of the estate and its beneficiaries. The law allows executors to make decisions that were not explicitly authorized by the will, as long as those decisions are prudent and serve the estate's interests. Priscilla's appointment had been justified as a protective measure for Lisa Marie. The opening of Graceland had been framed as a preservation effort. The renegotiation of contracts had been presented as the fulfillment of fiduciary duty. All of these actions were legally defensible, but they were not directed by Elvis. They were interpretations of what Elvis might have wanted, or what was best for the estate he left behind, made by people who had their own interests and perspectives. Joseph Hanks, the accountant who would be named as co-trustee in the will, resigned in 1980. He had served for 5 years after Vernon's death, but his role had diminished as Priscilla assumed greater control. His resignation was described as amicable, but it marked the final severance from the structure Elvis had originally designated. By the late 1980s, Priscilla was the dominant figure in the estate's management. The National Bank of Commerce remained a co-trustee, but its role was largely administrative. Priscilla made the strategic decisions. She hired executives to run Elvis Presley Enterprises, the business entity that had been created to manage the estate's commercial operations. She approved licensing deals, museum expansions, and branding initiatives. In 1991, the estate's annual revenue exceeded $15 million. Graceland was one of the most visited private homes in the United States, second only to the White House in some estimates. Elvis's music catalog was being reissued and repackaged for new audiences. His image appeared on products in dozens of countries. The estate that had been valued at $4 million in 1977 was now estimated to be worth over $75 million. And in 1993, Lisa Marie Presley turned 20. Under the terms of the trust established by Elvis's will, She was to receive full control of the estate. On February 1st, 1993, the trust was dissolved, and ownership of the estate transferred to Lisa Marie. But the estate she inherited was not the estate her father had left. The structure had changed. The revenue model had changed. The public relationship to Elvis's image and legacy had changed. Graceland was a business. Elvis Presley Enterprises was a corporation. Licensing agreements extended into international markets. The estate's value had been built over 16 years by decisions Lisa Marie had no part in making. Priscilla stepped back from day-to-day management, but she remained involved as an advisor. Lisa Marie, who had grown up largely outside of Memphis and had limited direct involvement in the estate's operations, relied on the existing infrastructure. The executives Priscilla had hired remained in place. The business model continued. Lisa Marie's relationship with the estate was complicated. She was the sole owner, but she had not built the enterprise. She had been its beneficiary during her minority, but she had not been consulted on major decisions. The estate had been managed in her name, for her benefit, but not according to her direction. In the years following her inheritance, Lisa Marie made her own choices. She pursued a music career. She married and divorced multiple times, including high-profile marriages to Michael Jackson and Nicolas Cage. She had 4 children. She lived in California, not Memphis. Graceland remained open to the public, but Lisa Marie visited infrequently. In 1998, Lisa Marie made a decision that would further transform the estate. She sold 85% of Elvis Presley Enterprises to Robert Sil, a media entrepreneur who specialized in acquiring and monetizing entertainment properties. The sale price was reported to be approximately $100 million. Lisa Marie retained ownership of Graceland itself, the mansion, and the 13 acres surrounding it, as well as the personal effects and artifacts within it. But the business entity, the licensing rights, the intellectual property, and the operational control of the commercial estate were transferred to Silliman's company, CKX, Inc. The sale was structured as a way for Lisa Marie to liquidate the value of the estate while protecting the physical property. She received cash and stock. She retained the right to be buried at Graceland alongside her father, but the business her mother had built was now owned by someone outside the family. Silliman's acquisition of Elvis Presley Enterprises was part of a larger strategy. CKX also owned the rights to American Idol and later acquired the estate of Muhammad Ali. Model was to consolidate entertainment properties and exploit them across multiple platforms: television, merchandise, live events, and digital media. Elvis's estate fit that model. Under CKX's ownership, Graceland's operations expanded further. The museum was renovated. New exhibits were added. A hotel and entertainment complex were built across the street from the mansion. Licensing deals proliferated. Elvis-themed slot machines appeared in casinos. Elvis impersonators were officially sanctioned and branded. The estate became a franchise. In 2005, CKX took the company public. Shares of CKX traded on the NASDAQ. Elvis Presley Enterprises was now a publicly traded asset, subject to quarterly earnings reports and shareholder expectations. The estate that had been created by a will in 1977 was now a line item on a corporate balance sheet. Lisa Marie's stake in CKX fluctuated with the stock price. She received dividends, but but she no longer controlled the business decisions. She had traded operational control for liquidity. The decision was financially rational, but it marked another layer of separation between Elvis's original intentions and the estate's evolution. In 2013, CKX sold Elvis Presley Enterprises to Authentic Brands Group, a brand management company based in New York. The purchase price was reported to be approximately $125 million. Authentic Brands Group specialized in acquiring and managing intellectual property for deceased celebrities, including Marilyn Monroe, Muhammad Ali, and later Michael Jackson. Under Authentic Brands Group's ownership, the commercialization of Elvis's image intensified. Hologram performances were developed. Elvis's likeness was digitally inserted into contemporary advertisements. Licensing agreements covered everything from apparel to liquor. The estate's revenue continued to grow, but the connection to the man who had created the underlying value became increasingly abstract. Lisa Marie remained the owner of Graceland, but the business operations were controlled by Authentic Brands Group under a long-term licensing agreement. She received payments from the agreement, but she did not direct strategy. She was a stakeholder, not a manager. Throughout this period, Lisa Marie's personal finances were turbulent. She inherited a significant estate in 1993, and she received over $100 million from the sale to CKX in 1998. But by the 2010s, reports emerged that she was facing financial difficulties. Court documents filed during her divorce from Michael Lockwood in 2016 revealed that she was millions of dollars in debt. The details were disputed, but the outline was clear. Lisa Marie had spent heavily. She had supported family members, funded personal projects, and maintained an expensive lifestyle. She had also claimed that her business manager had mismanaged her finances. Lawsuits were filed. Settlements were reached, but the wealth that had been built by the estate's transformation had not insulated her from financial instability. On January 12, 2023, Lisa Marie Presley died at the age of 54. She suffered cardiac arrest at her home in Calabasas, California. She was buried at Graceland, in the meditation garden, alongside her father, her son Benjamin Keogh, and other family members. Her death triggered another transfer of the estate. Under the terms of her will, Graceland and her remaining stake in the estate's licensing agreements were to pass to her three surviving daughters, Riley Keogh and twins Harper and Finley Lockwood. But the will was contested. Priscilla Presley, Lisa Marie's mother, filed a petition challenging an amendment to the will that had removed Priscilla as a trustee. The dispute centered on a document allegedly signed by Lisa Marie in 2016 that replaced Priscilla and the former business manager as co-trustees, with Lisa Marie's two adult children, Riley and Benjamin. Benjamin had died by suicide in 2020, leaving Riley as the sole trustee designated in the amendment. Priscilla's legal team argued that the amendment was invalid, citing irregularities in the signature and the lack of proper notification. Riley's legal team argued that the amendment was valid and reflected Lisa Marie's wishes. The case was filed in Los Angeles Superior Court. It was settled in May 2023, with Riley assuming control as trustee and Priscilla receiving an undisclosed financial settlement. The dispute was brief, but it underscored a recurring theme. The estate, established by Elvis's will in 1977, had been in a state of contested interpretation for nearly 50 years. Vernon had managed it according to his understanding, Priscilla had restructured it according to her vision. Lisa Marie had sold parts of it according to her needs, and now Riley was inheriting it according to a legal framework that had been amended, challenged, and settled outside of public view. Graceland remains open to the public. It attracts approximately 600,000 visitors per year. Revenue from tickets, merchandise, and licensing continues to flow. Authentic Brands Group continues to manage the commercial rights to Elvis's name, image, and likeness. The estate, in its current form, is a profitable enterprise, but it is not the estate Elvis Presley left in 19... The will he signed designated specific people to manage specific assets for the benefit of his daughter. That structure lasted less than 2 years. Everything that followed was built on legal interpretations, business decisions, and family negotiations that Elvis never participated in. There is no evidence that Elvis wanted Graceland to become a museum. There is also no evidence that he opposed it. He never stated whether he wanted his image commercialized aggressively or protected from overexposure. He never outlined a long-term strategy for his intellectual property. He never anticipated that his estate would be sold, resold, and managed by corporate entities he had never heard of. He left those decisions to others, and those others decided. The estate's financial recovery is often cited as a success story. Priscilla is frequently credited with saving it from insolvency. The opening of Graceland is seen as a stroke of genius. The licensing deals are presented as evidence of effective brand management, and by conventional measures, these assessments are accurate. The estate generates significant revenue. The Presley name remains globally recognized. Graceland is a cultural landmark, but the success was built on choices Elvis never made and structures he never designed. The will he signed in March 1977 was a static document. The estate it governed became a dynamic entity, reshaped continuously by people who were not Elvis, acting in his name, using his assets under his legacy. In legal terms, the executors and trustees acted appropriately. They fulfilled their fiduciary obligations. They preserved and grew the estate for the benefit of the named beneficiaries. They made decisions that were prudent under the circumstances. They navigated complex financial and legal challenges. They turned a declining estate into a thriving enterprise. But in human terms, the estate evolved into something unrecognizable. The man who earned the fortune had no voice in how it was managed after his death. His wishes, to the extent they were recorded, were limited to a few paragraphs of testamentary language. Everything else was inference, interpretation, and invention. There is a silence at the center of this. Elvis's will speaks only to the moment of his death. It names beneficiaries and fiduciaries. It establishes a trust. It provides for immediate family members, but it does not speak to what should happen if the estate runs out of money. It does not address whether Graceland should be preserved or sold. It does not mention the possibility of commercialization. It does not anticipate changes in management, ownership, or control. And so those changes occurred in the absence of direction, each one legally justified. Each one altering the estate a little further from its origin. Vernon managed conservatively and died quickly. Priscilla managed aggressively and transformed the estate into a business. Lisa Marie inherited the business and sold much of it. Riley inherited the remainder and settled disputes to secure it. At that stage, someone made decisions that Elvis had not made, And at each stage, the estate moved further from the static document signed in 1977, and closer to a living entity shaped by the priorities of the living. The estate Elvis left is now managed by people who never knew him. It is owned, in part, by corporations that did not exist when he died. It is visited by people who were born decades after his death. It generates revenue from products and platforms he never imagined. It has been the subject of litigation, negotiation, and settlement in courtrooms he never entered. And through all of this, the will remains unchanged. It sits in the probate records of Shelby County, Tennessee. 17 pages, signed March 3rd, 1977, admitted to probate August 22nd, 1977. It is the legal foundation of everything that followed. But it is not a blueprint. It is a framework. And frameworks can be built upon, reinterpreted, and reshaped by those who come after. Elvis Presley's estate changed after his death, not through fraud or malfeasance, but through the ordinary accumulation of decisions made in the name of prudence, preservation, and profit. Those decisions were made by people who claimed to act in his interest, or in the interest of his heirs, or in the interest of his legacy. And perhaps they did, but they were not his decisions. They were theirs. The estate that exists today is a construct. It bears his name. It profits from his work. It occupies his home. But it was built by other hands, according to other plans, in response to circumstances he never faced. And no amendment was ever added. If you're interested in documented inheritance cases and unresolved family disputes, consider subscribing.